He's gonna get. He's gonna fight me. He's a big Viking. He thinks he's awesome.
Hey everybody, it is me again, the Undead Viking, and I'm doing yet another one of these in the series of how to create a campaign. And ostensibly this is how to create a campaign, as I said, for Dungeons & Dragons, but a lot of the things that I'm talking about, especially this episode of this 10-part series, is applicable to most RPGs that you're going to be putting together, you know, like especially things like Shadowrun, or thinking about it, I'm thinking of some of the other like sci-fi ones that I've played. But regardless, this one, as I said, as you probably noticed in the title or whatever, it's called The Spheres of Influence. Now, this is a little abstract here, but and this one is one that you might not really focus too much on when you are creating your campaign world. And you definitely can put a lot into this, but it's something that I tend to, at the very least, have like just the base groundwork of it. A lot of times when, like, if you put a lot of work and effort into a campaign, what will happen is that you have all this background material and your players never touch any of it. The next episode of this that I want to do, which is going to be called like Sandbox or Rails, which, you know, we'll wait for that one. I'm not going to go too much further into that, but I will touch on the fact that, like, there are a lot of times when players will put together, or GMs or referees or dungeon masters or whatever, will put a lot of effort into like the intricacies of all these different like power groups and whatever, and like, you know, their hierarchies and so forth. And then it turns out that, like, the players themselves, like, never really go and mess with that group or don't have any interaction. Now, I'm a big believer in writing for writing's sake. I mean, it's a creative outlet. It's something that, you know, you can write for yourself. I know myself and a lot of other people who write a lot, we tend to go back and reread the stuff that we wrote and, like, enhance it and change it. There is I kind of always feel weird when I go back and read some of the stuff that I've written, because I feel like it's kind of self-serving, but I mean, I do get a pleasure out of that. I like looking at that thing I created, even if I haven't shared it with anybody. It's just for myself. So I do think that there's some use to that, but you know, like, if you have a small amount of time to create your campaign, this might be something, as I said, you just want to lay the groundwork and see where the players end up going and who they interact with, and then you can kind of expand upon that. A really good example of this is an old campaign that I was in that my buddy Jason ran. I can't remember all the particulars of this campaign. It is the story. I mean, if I ever could tell, like, I've told a few stories about it in these videos, but it was this long-running campaign for a game system that we created ourselves. We called it Fantasy. I'm going to do a video at one point talking about our, like, role-playing game creation process, like how we've created these different rules and how those have changed over time. But anyway, again, trying to stay on track here. But with this game Fantasy, like, Jason gave us these printed sheets of information. And this is back, you know, in like the early 90s, back when, like, you know, dot matrix printers and and what have you. I remember there was all these, like, little like he talked about this large, like, kind of a senate, if you will, like a classic senate, and all these different power groups had different levels of power within this large city state that we lived in, and there were all of these, like, you know, different subsets of merchants and different subsets of different religions and these things like that. And even some really like crazy things, like, you know, they were just really were out there. And I always remember this one. It was called the Brotherhood of Gora Makaibo. And I always loved that name. And it just really, but, like, my character wouldn't have any reason to be a part of that group. And I always was kind of like, oh, if my character ever dies, my character never did. If my character ever dies, I'm the next character. I'm going to have him be part of this weird, the Brotherhood of the Gora Makaibo. And it was, like, supposedly this really weird religion that was out there worshiping these, like, strange summonable creatures or whatever, and they were just crazies, you know. But I thought it was really cool. And I remember I mentioned after the campaign was over, and I mentioned to Jason, I was like, that was something I really wanted. We never interacted with them at all. And Jason was just like, oh yeah, I mean that was just a cool name. And I was like, what do you mean? Oh, it's like you kind of did run into him because there was like this other part of the story where we eventually kind of ran into these like this weird race of kind of wolfkin people that like and it was just that's kind of getting beyond here. But I mean we ran into like these weird things, and he said that if we had explored the Brotherhood of Goromakaibo, we would have just ran into another style of those wolfkin that were just more in step with that brotherhood that he created. So I mean, it was just a name. But when he told me that, it kind of set off a light bulb in my head, and I was just like, huh. I can just come up with really cool names for things, and if the players see that and see, oh, that looks really cool, that looks really interesting, then I can start injecting my ideas into it. All right, so what does this have to do with spheres of influence? Well, so your campaign is going to likely, depending upon I've been talking about this Valley of the Dragon, that we've kind of been slowly given like shape to this idea or whatever, and this Valley of the Dragon, like if we had spheres of influence, these are the people that like control some section of this valley, or if you're playing, Traveler, you could be saying. In the sector of the galaxy, or if you're playing Top Secret, like the old school spy RPG, like it could be different countries controlling different areas of the world, things like that. But where I'm going with this is that usually you're going to have overlap, and in this valley, like you have this dragon that controls everything, right? And but there's going to be these little fiefdoms as well, and these fiefdoms like have their own little sphere of influence that they control, and even though the dragon kind of covers everything, and then these fiefdoms might overlap a little bit, and that's where there's maybe some friction between this, that, and everything. And then in those fiefdoms, maybe there's 2 or 3 different religions, and each of those have a little sphere of influence within those fiefdoms. Maybe there's like an assassin's guild or a thieves guild that are in these fiefdoms that are like have their own. Maybe there's more than one thieves guild and they're warring or whatever. There's like also the merchants guild. There's the you could have like the city guard is its own sphere of influence, and so on and so forth. And you can kind of create these and give them cool names and whatever. And anybody who's ever said, oh, I can't come up with any cool names, I mean, man, the internet is just like the perfect thing in the world for it. Or just like I know somebody who created like the names of all of their NPCs were always they just used secondary characters that were in episodes of Deep Space Nine. And they just pulled up a big giant list and they just started stabbing at the names and picking them that way. But, so don't worry about like coming up with cool names for things. But anyway, my point is that just get a piece of paper out or a virtual piece of paper and just start at like the biggest thing you think of that's going to be in your campaign world, whether it is like this dragon that's in charge of this valley, or you can say it's like the king, or you can say it's the duke, or you can say it's this super rich, powerful pair of merchant gnomes that just control everything. And then just work your way down. And then what I do usually is I start, I don't have a really good picture to show you, but just, picture this in your mind. Picture like, not like a flow chart per se, but like, picture like a circle with a person's name on it, and then draw another circle of like another group that they kind of overlap with. Now that doesn't necessarily mean that like those people are necessarily warring, but what it means is that they deal with each other on a regular basis. And if there's a circle that encapsulates another circle, then I see that as a situation where that group kind of governs that circle, like it controls it in some way, like or it's one of those things where it's more powerful and maybe can exert force upon it to cause it to do certain things that it wants it to do. And now you've come up with these relationships with these different spheres of influence. And the biggest thing that this happens is that, especially in this day and age of watching movies movies, but I mean like TV shows like Game of Thrones and whatever, where we're talking about court intrigue and things like that. That's a hot button. That is a thing that draws players in and gets people excited to play your game. And so if you are able to go ahead and like have something like that within your game, and have like what feels like there's all this like back channel churning and like secret meetings going on, and you put your players in the midst of that soup, they're gonna feel like, hey, we're power players in this world. You know, who's the power behind the throne? Who's the power behind the power behind the power behind the throne? You know, things like that. And once the players are into it and they feel like, you know, they're part of that world and they're actually like affecting it and changing it, and like and like maybe they're valued like allies of certain groups, and maybe they're hated enemies of others, and so all of a sudden now, once again, the verisimilitude, you know, the like the living, breathing world starts to come alive, and your players are just like, you know, excited each and every time they come to a session. So biggest thing, like I said, is just have at least a half a dozen like things that you think are like the important players, you know, as far as, and then remember how we made like the big bad NPCs, like we talked about that. Now, like you can take those NPCs and you can start inserting them into these spheres of influence, these groups, these you know, scions of power, if you will, and you can then, you know, start building up more and more of the infrastructure within your campaign world and get people excited about it. All right, so there you go. That was Spheres of Influence. The next one, as I said, we're going to talk about Sandbox or Rails, and this is more of like you're creating your campaign. Like it's going to be more about you know, not so much like an actual physical like creation of anything within your world, but how what kind of gameplay you're going to be shooting for, and those two things are not mutually exclusive. You can definitely have some interlap and shades of gray in the middle there. So as always, thank you very much for taking time to watch this. I hope some of you are getting some ideas and you're getting inspired a little bit by this. If you have any questions or any ideas or anything at all, please comment and say whatever. If you want to subscribe to my channel, great. You can expect to have lots of RPG content, as well as the board game reviews and the RPG reviews as well, continuing coming. And if you have any ideas for RPG videos, as always, or any videos for that matter, let me know. I'd be happy to try to maybe make those for you. But thank you very much, and until next time, I'm the Undead Viking. Be the best version of you that you possibly can be, and I guarantee you, the more love you give to the universe, the more love the universe is going to give right back to you. All right, take it easy.